Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you to another edition of Books and Looks. Yes, it's our weekly voyage of discovery in the wonderful world of books. Books I've read and authors I've interviewed. And today, well, we're venturing to something we've never done before. We're looking into the self help and meditation field. That's right. A fantastic book called Your Heart Was Made for This. Gentleman Oren Jay Sofer is the author. Wonderful, wonderful gentleman, wrote a tremendous book. It is filled with insights. It's filled with helpful things to help you understand the thing that's going on in your life. Separate chapters on things like attention and concentration and joy and things like this. And this is a very interesting gentleman. He's written a book that just, I'll tell you what, it is an easy read. It is very easy. He fills it with personal experiences. He fills it with stories. He fills it with things you can do to help increase your way and make things easier for yourself as we make it through this world of ours. As he says, something as simple as deep breathing. Yeah, something as simple as thinking about the joy you sometimes get or you get when you wash the dishes, that you're making the place clean for people, or the kindness you might give to people, or you might receive from people. I tell you, this is a really good book. So I really endorse this, and I'll tell you what, this is a great conversation we had. His name is Oren Jay Sofer, and the book is called Your Heart Was Made for This. So let's go right to that interview. Oren, welcome to Books and Look.
Thanks so much, Blaine. Happy to be here.
Well, you're our first ever self-help book or immediate meditation book. We've never done this before. I'm looking forward to learning a whole lot about something I don't know much about. And let's start off with a bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where's your education? Let's start a little bit. Talk about you first.
Sure. I grew up in New Jersey, northern New Jersey. Both my parents are Jewish, middle class family, raised in the suburbs, and had a very blessed, privileged life as a child. Um, had some challenges when I was about 10, when one of my family members was diagnosed with some mental illness, and it kind of turned things upside down, which was a real turning point for me in my life. And I talk about that some in the book, and how long it took for me to start to come to terms with some of the difficult emotions that stirred up for me. I went to school. I did undergraduate training at Columbia University, and ended up studying religion because I was trying to find my way in the world and make sense of things. And had the opportunity to travel to India and study Buddhist meditation, which was a life changing experience for me, and really helped me to start to understand a little bit more about why I was suffering so much, in spite of all of the blessings I had in my life. And things kind of unfolded from there. I went deeper into the meditation practice, lived at a meditation center, studied a lot, and it's become a core part of my work. And then along the way, I also trained in something called nonviolent communication, which is a form of interpersonal communication practice and also its own kind of awareness practice that helps us to build healthier relationships and have more meaningful, effective conversations, which is the subject of my first book, Say What You Mean.
Okay. Wow. So you started having some issues when you were young, and then you went to college, and it was in college you went to this over to India.
Yeah, yeah, it was a study abroad program. So I had the good fortune of being able to travel to India and do some studies over there with some really fine teachers and learn to meditate. And yeah, it really connected with me. It felt like for the first time in my life, someone was talking about the experiences I was having in a way that made sense to me in terms of struggling, feeling afraid or lost, suffering, and just addressing the human condition in a very frank way. Not that was depressing, but that was actually hopeful that there's something we can do about the struggles that we have in terms of how we understand ourselves and relate to our life, which is really the heart of meditation. It's not about achieving some special state or bliss. but actually really understanding ourselves more fully and transforming the way that we relate to other people and to life so that we can live our best life and realize our potential.
All right. Well, now, before we actually get into the book, like, question: a lot of people when I talk to them about, the meditation, about this and that, they say, "Well, I'm Presbyterian. Can a Presbyterian meditate? Will this be good for anybody, no matter what their religion, or must they be a Buddhist to get the most out of this book?"
No, absolutely, and that's a huge part of my approach to not just meditation but contemplative practice. Is that these are skills that are human skills. To be able to pay attention, to be able to quiet our mind and listen more deeply to our heart or to someone else or to the sound of a river. So these are skills that you don't have to believe anything or sign up for anything. It's really about accessing and strengthening our innate capacities. And Blaine, one of the things I talk about in the book is the difference between meditation and contemplative practice. And this might be a good place to just name that. So I liken the relationship between meditation and contemplative practice to the relationship between, say, running and exercise. So not everyone likes to run, but we all need to exercise. The human body is designed to move. Our all of our circulatory and lymph and muscular systems function better when we're getting enough movement and exercise. So just because you don't like to run doesn't mean you're not going to get some movement and exercise in your life trying to be healthy. So in the same way, not everyone likes to or wants to meditate. It's one particular way of cultivating and sort of enhancing our inner life. So, what is contemplative practice then? Contemplative practice is anything that gives us perspective on our life. It connects us with a sense of purpose, with our values, with meaning, and opens up a whole nother avenue to the way that we live and understanding ourselves. And so the book is much broader than just doing meditation practice. It's really meant to be a practical and accessible guide for folks to use their daily activities, their whatever you're already doing in your life to deepen and strengthen qualities that can bring more meaning and purpose.
Well, now, I think I wrote you that I said there are a lot of different books out there on meditation. I mean, my brother-in-law, Lawrence, over in Romania, he sends me stuff every week. Oh, you got to look at this. You got to take that. You got to. I said, I got this guy coming on, Oren Jay Sofer. I said, I really like his book. What makes yours different? Is it because you do this how do I say it? Contemplative practice? Does that make yours different than other meditation books or guides?
Yeah. Well, I would like to think it's different and better, but since I haven't read and don't know the specific books you're talking about, it's a little difficult to say. But what I can say is, I take a very down to earth approach to both meditation, which again is one particular skill, is one particular form of contemplative practice, and to this idea of cultivating our inner life, developing perspective on things, um, and try to make it as accessible as possible. So the book is really designed to be a companion in our lives. The chapters are short, they're practical, they're specific suggestions for how to cultivate the different qualities and traits in the book, which we'll get to. And I think that's really in some ways what makes the book unique is I wanted it to be something that a busy parent like myself could sit down and read 5 or 10 minutes in the evening and receive something of value and have something to reflect on. So the chapters, you can read it in 1 or 2 sittings. They're not very long, but there's still some depth there. And then the practices give you something concrete and specific to do in your day, in your life, without adding extra items to your to-do list.
Very true. Now, you divide the book into four parts: part one, two, three, and four, but you never gave a title to the parts. Why didn't you title the parts? And was there an overall classification in your mind when you wrote this?
Yeah, so the book is structured in in a very intentional way. And so I'll take a step back from the four parts and just mention like there are 26 chapters. So why 26? That's a lot of chapters. What's going on there? The idea here, so the book is centered around cultivating positive qualities. It's this understanding that each of us comes into this world with certain potentials, certain capacities like curiosity, courage, kindness, gratitude, joy, play, compassion, contentment. These are all innate qualities that we have to some degree that can transform our life, help us be more effective in our work and our world, and really bring a certain kind of richness and power to our relationships. But the key is we actually have to attend to them. We need to cultivate and strengthen them. So the idea is that people would devote 2 weeks to each chapter, and then you'd have a whole year to go through the book. So this isn't the kind of book that you sit down and read over the course of 1 week. There's the idea is it's something to keep with you for a period of time, because what I'm interested in is lasting transformation. How do we actually make the most of the time that we've been given on the planet? And that takes time. So each chapter you take a week or two, and that gives you half a year or a whole year to go through the book. Now, the four parts go through a certain cycle. Each part goes through a certain kind of cycle of development. It's a little bit like a wave pattern. So you start with foundational qualities, then you're building energy, and then the part sort of culminates in this sort of settling into qualities that are more about freedom and release. So things like wisdom or patience and balance. Or contentment and forgiveness, qualities that are more refined. And so rather than having the whole book just do that once, again, because I'm wanting people to spend time with this and integrate it slowly, it's like I have the image a little bit of a spiral. It's like you go around multiple times, and each time you're going deeper and deeper into this very core pattern in the human psyche of developing our faculties, our resources, our energy. That said, I also think of the book a little bit like a choose your own adventure. So the table of contents is a little bit like a roadmap, but at the same time, I want people to be able to open the table of contents, look at it, and say, what do I need right now? Gosh, I just feel so overwhelmed and exhausted. I see there's a chapter on rest. Wow, that really speaks to me. I need some extra rest. How do I get more rest? I'm working 2 jobs and I have kids. All right, let's look at the chapter on rest and see what he has to say about it. So it is also designed to be flexible and to meet people where they're at so that it's useful.
It does that, and that's a lot of the things I know people want to know. Can they get specific help in specific areas, and that they can get from this book? But before we get into the book, do you want to? Would you have a moment to read a little bit to us of the book? Would you be able to read something to
Sure,
us that might
absolutely.
get people might get excited about hearing that?
Your heart was made for love, for connection, belonging, and meaningful relationship with other people, beings, and the earth. Your heart was made to give and receive, to know joy, purpose, and freedom. All of this is possible for you and for each of us. And yet, painful emotions, ignorance, and oppressive conditions disconnect us from our heart's potential. The flow of this love has encountered obstacles from the beginning, but perhaps never more than now. Our ancestors' village was not the global village of the 21st century, with its seemingly infinite complexities and pressures, nor did we evolve to engage with social media algorithms or constant alerts of tragedy. How do we reclaim our birthright to love while navigating a complex world in crisis? How do we make love our guide? I'll read one more short paragraph. The Buddha long ago taught that we can shape our inner lives. He said, whatever the mind frequently thinks upon and ponders, that will become its inclination. Our thoughts, feelings, and intentions grow into habits, and over time, settle into our character. Contemplative practice roots itself in this power to mold the heart and thus renew ourselves. Today, we call this neuroplasticity. If we do not shape the heart, the world will do it for us. And the world does not have our highest welfare in mind.
You are exactly correct. The world is not made for us. And, they're not trying to do anything to help us get through our days and through our lives. And so I really found that opening just caught me and it made me propel us to chapter one, which was the chapter on attention. Now, do you think that's the most important thing we can have? Attention? Is that the most basic quality we got to get?
There is a reason I put it first. Absolutely. It's kind of a linchpin quality. So, attention is one of our most precious resources. We live our life differently based on how we pay attention. And so, the first question to ask oneself is, where does my attention go every day? Like internally, what are we thinking about? What are we paying attention to? Am I just ruminating on things that distress me, that I don't like, that are wrong? Am I dwelling on the aspects of myself that I don't like or focusing on things I can't control, feeling worried and helpless? Externally, where do we put our attention? Where do we focus our time, our energy? Are we just lost in screens to self regulate? Are we wasting time doing things that aren't actually important to us? So it's also important to understand that we live in what's known as the attention economy. So there is a relentless monetization of our attention. There's a raging battle for trying to to capture and then retain our attention through technology and the media. Because when you control attention, there are two things you can do. One, you can generate profit through advertising. And two, you can influence action. So, one of the core things to recognize is one, that we actually have a choice. When we're aware, we can start to notice where our attention goes habitually and where it's pulled by technology, by our environment, by other people. And then we can begin to exert more conscious choice and agency. We can reclaim our attention. And now, this is a very, very powerful thing to do because as we start to reclaim our attention and make more deliberate choices about where we place our attention, two things happen. Number one, externally, we begin to have more agency in our life. Instead of wasting half an hour going down the rabbit hole on social media or, you know, doing something in our house that actually isn't important, we recognize, hey, I've got an hour right now. What's really important to me? What do I want to do? How do I want to spend this time? And that's based on recognizing that we have a choice over where we place our attention. But the even more fundamental and transformative effect of reclaiming our attention is that we start to be aware of the forces and energies in our own hearts and minds that we are strengthening. Remember that quote from the introduction: whatever the mind frequently thinks upon and ponders, that's going to become its inclination. So we're always practicing something. How are we living our life? Are we living our life reinforcing habits of worry, anxiety, frustration, rushing, agitation? Guess what? We're going to get really good at worrying, being agitated, anxious, rushing. So when we choose where we're placing our attention, we can recognize those habits and develop the skill to begin strengthening other ways of being inside, other capacities, other traits. And this is what the book is all about. How do I disengage my attention from a habit, say, like worry? I'm worrying. How am I going to get to the store and get the food and enough time to do my work done? And what's going to happen with that email I haven't responded to? And what's going to happen with that project kid locally? And how about the next storm that's coming? And recognize, oh, there's something else I can give my attention to that would be more nourishing and supportive, whether that's joy or gratitude or something like concentration and really focusing on the task at hand. And in this way, as we begin to make more conscious choices about where we place our attention internally, what seeds we're watering in our own heart and mind, everyday activities, instead of becoming just meaningless getting through them, begin to actually strengthen the inner foundation or basis from which we're living. And this is why attention is so important. It starts to open up this possibility of using our time to develop these powerful transformative qualities.
Very true. And then we jump ahead to chapter 5, which is on concentration. And now concentration is different than attention. How does that differ? Can you explain to us the difference?
Sure. Yeah. So there are all these different aspects of the mind and the heart that we have access to and that function on a day to day basis. Attention is one, which is just the basic capacity to direct your mind in a particular way. Um, Concentration is the stability or continuity of the attention. So, for example, um, if I didn't have enough concentration to engage in this interview, I would be listening to what you were saying, and then I would be checking my email, and then looking at my phone, and then getting up and doing something. The attention would be moving from one thing to the next to the next. Or if it were less obvious, I might be thinking about something else and not listening and not responding to the question because my attention was moving between all these different things. So concentration is the ability to put your attention somewhere and keep it there. Now, one of the biggest misunderstandings about concentration is that ability, the misunderstandings that capacity to stay focused and connected comes from force, from a certain amount of will. You can do that for a certain amount of time, but it's expensive energetically and it's also brittle. We lose that concentration very quickly when something else comes into our field of attention. It all kinds of falls apart. So, um, holistic concentration, kind of collectedness in our heart and mind, comes about through relaxation and interest. And this is akin to what's known as a flow state. We are effortlessly connected to what's happening. Our mind and our heart, all of our inner resources are focused and steady and collected on the task at hand. And there's no strain involved because we want to be here. There's a sense of purpose and connection. So we can cultivate this capacity for concentration, again, just in our daily life by finding and experimenting with how do I bring in a little bit of relaxation? How do I find some ease in this activity, whether it's washing the dishes, responding to emails, walking the dog? How do I get interested? How do I find a certain kind of meaning or connection with this activity instead of just trying to get through it? Because again, there are things we all need to do that we might not want to do in our life, and yet they serve a purpose. If they didn't serve a purpose, hopefully we wouldn't be doing them. So, recollecting what that purpose is and recollecting that the way I am doing this, how I'm engaging with this activity, is shaping my mind, is setting the stage for everything else I do in my life. If I rush through washing the dishes feeling really anxious and rushed, well, guess what? The next thing I get to, I'm going to still have that rushing energy all day long. Now, being concentrated, cultivating ease doesn't mean moving slowly necessarily. You can be moving quickly and be relaxed and focused. So these are the kinds of skills we can develop using the tools and the practices I explore in the book.
Okay. Well, you sort of talked about energy, so I want to move on, if I could, to courage. Now, that's a fascinating chapter. That's a fascinating chapter, and you even have a personal story in the book about that. Uh, and how do you define courage versus what maybe we as a general public define as courage?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think of courage not so much as the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward and act in spite of fear. Um, Courage is it's our capacity to turn towards and be with what's difficult, what's hard. And fear is a natural response to danger. Nothing wrong with fear. It's an important signal. But there's a difference between feeling afraid and panicking or freezing. Our minds kind of amplify a threat and even imagine certain threats because of the evolutionary tendency to the negativity bias. So, one of the things that contemplative practice can help us do through training attention and also developing skills like mindfulness, which is a balanced awareness, we can start to discern between, what's something worthwhile to be concerned about, what's a real threat, and what's an imagined threat. And as we make those distinctions, we can develop a more flexible and enduring capacity for courage. than what we might think of in sort of the popular media as this kind of courage, as this, like primal counterattack of responding to the threat aggressively and destroying it. Instead, what if courage were our capacity to assess the threat accurately and to stay grounded and connected in the face of challenge? So this is how I understand courage. And the story that I tell at the beginning of the chapter that we were chatting about before the interview was, for me, the courage it took to agree to bring a child into this world. I'm in my 40s. I'm over 45, and my wife and I weren't planning on having kids. But at a certain point, that changed for her, and she came to me and said, "I think I want to try." And that was a big change for me. That was a big shift in direction. And I knew very clearly that this would be one of the most important decisions I would make in my whole life, that it would affect the rest of my life, if we were able to have a child and conceive, which I'm very happy to say that we were. And so as I got quiet inside and really considered this opportunity, this invitation that she had made, um, the fears that came up were primarily around the future of our planet, on the future habitability of our planet, the fraying of social institutions. There's so much uncertainty and so much rapid change. I said, what kind of world is this child going to inherit? And is this something that I can do with integrity? It wasn't so much a personal, am I up for the task, and am I going to be a good dad and all that? I actually felt interested and excited in that prospect. It was more out of concern and empathy for this being, this child, and the trajectory of human civilization at this time. And so it took a lot of courage just even to look at those questions honestly. And then it took even more courage to say, um, yes, I think there's something worthwhile in coming here onto the planet, in spite of all the challenges and the dangers, and doing our best to help one another. And yes, I think that there is still, hope for us as a species, not without tremendous challenge and suffering, which is unfolding even as we speak, but that there can also be goodness and beauty alongside that. And so that question of having a child also really informed the book for me, and it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to try to make these connections between how do we live our best life, how do we realize our potential and contribute in a world that has so much hardship and challenge at this time.
We could talk about every chapter, but we can't. I mean, we could go on for
We
hours. But
could if we had time.
I'm gonna jump us up to chapter 10, which is on kindness. I really enjoyed your chapter on kindness.
Oh, I'm
That
so
was,
glad.
yeah, that was highly enjoyed. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Oh, absolutely. Um, Kindness. Well, sometimes it feels like kindness is in short supply in our world, and it makes all the difference, doesn't it? And just think about the times in our life where we haven't felt or known or experienced much kindness, and how dreary and lonely and depressing that can be. And the effect of just one kind gesture, text message from somebody, a genuine interaction, a smile can make all the difference in our day. So kindness comes from the word kin, which is pointing to the truth of our interrelatedness. So kindness starts to heal the isolation that is so endemic in our world. And it protects our hearts. It protects our hearts from fear, from anger, from hate. It softens the harshness in the world. It connects us with the beauty of what we can offer as human beings. So I'll share a short story, just kind of illustrating some of the power of kindness, um, and this innate goodness in us. One of the things that I used to do quite often when my son was smaller As I would take walks in the neighborhood and put him in the carry. And when he was old enough, I'd put him in the carry facing out. We'd like to see things, and we'd take a walk around the neighborhood. So one evening, I was taking a walk, and I'm coming down the hill to this little circle, and there's a pub right on the corner. And these two guys are sitting out front sharing a beer, um, middle aged. And as I turn the corner, they turn and look, and they see my son, and he's very outgoing, and so he's, smiling and beaming, and both of their faces just light up, and this wave and hello, hi, and it's just this beautiful rose, this beautiful reminder for me of how innate kindness is. It's there, right there under the surface, ready to come out when the conditions are right. So kindness is an expression of love. It comes from love. It's like the tip of that wave, and the water underneath it is love. And love isn't just some kind of romantic feeling or some special emotion we experience. It's a core human need, but it's also a skill. It's something that we can develop. And so this is that the chapter on kindness is really offering this reframing of kindness, not as a special experience or as something that is just reserved for our friends or the people who we're close with, but really as a way of life, as something that can brighten our world, bring joy and pleasure to our own hearts and others around us, um, and really guide us in how we live. So I'm curious, if there was anything else in the chapter that stood out to you, or that was meaningful for you.
It's the back and forth, the fact that giving kindness and then receiving kindness, it works as a two-way street. And like you say, when
Yeah,
they were kind, when they were waving, and it brought a spark to you too. You felt good about your child receiving the wave back and everything else. And yeah, it's a wonderful experience when you have that. So yeah, I
yeah.
really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that too, because it really highlights with many of these qualities, we're talking about kindness right now, but particularly the relational ones, like kindness, like empathy, like forgiveness. They are traits that we can and do develop internally. But they're also traits that we learn and experience and develop through relationship and through receiving them. So that give and take is also, it's like to know kindness, we also need to receive kindness. To know forgiveness, we also need to receive forgiveness. And so it's pointing to our relational nature, and that's not to say that, well, no one's been nice to me, so I'm not going to be kind. It's quite the other way. You feel like no one's being nice to me. This is a terrible, dreary world. It's like, well, at least I can be kind, and then it starts the cycle going, right? But it is a two-way street in that we do give and receive in that way.
Yep. Yep. Now you have a chapter here on joy. And I'm reading your chapter on joy, and I'm thinking of Mac Davis singing, you got to stop and smell the roses. And boy, I always love that song because we get joy from the smallest things of life. And I'm so happy that you brought this up and you have a chapter on joy. Could you tell us a little bit about joy?
Yeah, it's such an essential part of our lives. I believe that human beings need joy, just like we need food and water and air. And to feel joy, we have to be willing to be touched by life, which means being open enough to receive. And this is why it's so important to attend to the places that our heart feels closed or hurt or angry or grieving. Because if we just harden around those rather than really attend to them with the kind of skills that I share in my work, um, we shut down and limit our capacity for joy, for happiness, for meaning, for connection. So joy too is a skill, and this is something, this is the language and the premise that I invite readers, listeners to explore. It's, what if joy were not just this thing that you either have or don't, or you get a certain amount of, and it's just about, how much good fortune comes your way or how successful you are. What if it were actually a skill that we could practice and develop and deepen, that we could train ourselves to experience more joy. And again, I'll use my son as an example of the incredible capacity for joy that we come into this life with. He loves raspberries. He loves all berries, and raspberries are one of his favorite. And to see his unbridled joy when we announce, or he asks for and we agree and we actually have some and say, that we want some raspberries, and he starts flailing his arms and going, "Wow!" He's just so excited, so filled with joy that he's going to get to eat raspberries. And then the way he eats them and he savors them, and there's so much pleasure and happiness. And we lose that. Our senses become dull, things become ordinary, routine. And again, this is the power. All of the qualities are connected in different ways. The power of something like mindfulness, which is our capacity to be aware in a balanced and curious way. If we bring mindfulness to something as simple as listening to the rain, it opens a doorway to joy. If we bring mindfulness to something as simple as drinking a glass of water, there can be wonder, there can be gratitude, there can be a kind of deeply satisfying enjoyment of this amazing experience of having our thirst quenched. So there are two traps that can interfere with our ability to experience joy. One is that show up a lot in meditation, spirituality, circles, healing communities, and one is this idea that we should feel calm and peaceful and happy all the time. And so, like, everything should be joyful and happy. And then we actually avoid and um, pull away from anything difficult or painful, or try to put a positive spin on it. And that actually limits the richness of life, because we're not open to all of it. And we can't shut down to one part of it without shutting down to other parts. The other trap is we associate, contemplation or philosophy or spirituality, healing, with a certain kind of seriousness. And Buddhists are accused of this all the time because of the Buddha's emphasis on suffering, but actually his teachings on suffering were about ending suffering. So it's actually quite good news. But it can get misinterpreted as, this kind of overly serious experience. And then we actually fear pleasure. We disengage or avoid joy. And so these practices aren't about cutting us off from anything, but actually opening to and feeling all of life. That's which is difficult and uplifting, that which is hard and joyful. I'll just put a pin in it and say that I think one of the great benefits of joy, and one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of inviting people to really nourish their hearts with joy, is that the more joy we have, the more resilience and strength we have to open to anger and grief and fear and pain, instead of shutting down or turning away. So it supports us with the difficult stuff also.
Your son and my wife would get along well. My wife
Oh,
goes
okay. Does she like
wild.
berries too?
Well, she likes them, but she goes wild over her peonies. Now, she loves flowers, and her peonies are the first ones that start to pop up here in South Carolina. And she looks outside at the pots, and oh, here they're coming, and here they're coming. And today it culminated. The first flower opened. The joy that she had
Wonderful.
that this flower, and now her 92-year-old friend who's living in the nursing home, Claire, is going to be coming over so she can share in the joy
Wonderful.
of the peonies. Yep. That,
Delightful. That's it.
exactly. Yep.
Exactly.
Right there. Yep. Dear Magda and her peonies. Every year it's the same thing. God love her. Anyway, hey, one of the last things, the specific chapter I want to get into is a chapter you have on rest. Boy, that's important. That is so important. And you know, when when I'm tired, my wife will say to me, "Go take a nap." No, that's not necessarily rest. I don't necessarily want to sleep. So tell us a little bit about rest, if you could.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's the most natural thing for us as human beings to rest when we're tired. And there's so much in our lives today that interferes with that, that makes it difficult to rest. that teaches us that we don't deserve it, or there's more we should be doing, or that complicates our capacity to downshift and unwind and rest. And so I think the first thing I want to say is to just really normalize how difficult it can be to rest. And when I say rest, and you kind of were indicating this in your question, I don't just mean sleep. I mean our capacity to downshift, to move from a state of physical and mental activity and activation to one of ease and downtime, slowing down, recharging, rejuvenating. And so I really like the way this other author, Tricia Hersey, defines rest in her book, Rest is Resistance. For those on social media, she has a great feed called the Nap Ministry. And she defines rest as anything that connects the body and mind, anything that connects the body and mind. And that's such a beautiful invitation to this very broad sense of how do we how do we downshift? How do we get more connected? Um, my understanding from evolutionary biology is that our ancestors had periods of downtime, engaging in this kind of rhythmic activities, whether it was walking or threshing or weaving or grooming or just chit chatting. And this provides a certain kind of regulation for our nervous system that is rejuvenating. So, just recognizing the importance of this, expanding our sense of what rest is, and beginning to investigate what interferes with my capacity for rest. How much of it is external? How much of it is internal? How much of it are ideas I have about what I should or shouldn't be doing, or what I do or don't deserve? How much of it is just the force of habit, and how difficult it is sometimes to downshift in our nervous system? And if that's the case, there are many things we can do and practices I share to start to um, kind of soothe and heal that tendency to always be on high alert, or always be rushing. Something as simple as um, taking some deep breaths and lengthening your exhalation just a little bit, like you're breathing out through a straw. That can help the nervous system to start to downshift and take, even 5 or 10 seconds of rest between tasks. And again, you mentioned energy earlier. These are two sides of the same coin. We need rest to have energy, and we need to use our energy wisely if we want to be able to rest. If we misuse our energy, pushing and rushing and blowing our circuits out, it becomes difficult to rest because we're fried, and our system is too tired and spent to rest. So there are great benefits in store when we start to value rest and redevelop and rediscover our capacity for it in so many ways.
Great. Now, every chapter you have, you end with four, I guess they're self-help things you can do. It's like reflection and meditation. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. Well, this is part of the core structure of the book, and this is taking the conceptual into the material. So it's the chapter itself is, here are some ideas, here are some concepts, some things to think about. This is what we've been talking about primarily, and then okay, so what? A big deal. So kindness is great. It brightens our day. Joy is wonderful when you can get it. All right, good news. Thanks, Oren. But how do I actually do it? Give me something to do so that I can experience this. So, the end of every chapter, there's some instructions, a little recipe. The first set of instructions is for what I call a reflection. And a reflection is something that you turn over. It's something you chew on. You take some time, you're out for a walk, you're driving to work, you just kind of like, well, think about that. You ask yourself a question and you just think about it. And so this is one way to explore the material that I'm offering to people as a reflection. The next is a meditation. And this is a way of training your heart, of cultivating the qualities, of looking inside and touching an experience of joy and amplifying it and strengthening it. So there are all different kinds of meditations throughout the book that are short. You can do them in 5 minutes and take longer if you want. Then there's an action, which is just what it is, something to do. Do this, try this. Next time you're washing the dishes, slow down a little, feel the warm, soapy water. Think of the people you're washing the dishes for and bring a little joy to your heart, bring a little presence to your life. And then finally is a section called If You Have Difficulties. And this is some tips on common challenges that can arise because, as inspiring or uplifting as I hope this stuff sounds, it's not always easy. And I want to be real about that and um, give people ideas for, well, here's a potential roadblock you might hit and what to do about it. So those four end each chapter: a reflection, and a meditation, an action, and then some tips for how to work with challenges that come up.
Tell me now, do you have to go back and keep learning? I mean, it just seems like you got it all right there. You got it all. That's amazing.
Oh, I'm learning and practicing every day. I wrote this book for myself as much as for everyone else. Life's hard and being a parent is hard and our world's falling apart. So every day I am practicing courage and forgiveness and resting and self-care and compassion, and it's a lifelong journey. So I am using the teachings in the book myself in my life every day. Yeah.
Well, now what's next? Are you working on another book, Oren?
Absolutely not.
No, huh?
I'm ra- I know I'm raising my son. I teach, so I teach a lot. A lot of my teaching is online, so that I can help take care of my family. I teach some retreats, 2 or 3 retreats here in the United States, one in Massachusetts, a couple here in California every year, and also a couple of online retreats, which are a great way to participate from home. And so, my work is really supporting people to transform their lives and live their dreams by realizing their potential and understanding and transforming what blocks them inside, using the tools of meditation, contemplation, and communication. So, what's next for me is really just continuing this work of sharing what I have been so lucky to learn in my own life with others through my classes, workshops, and retreats, and devoting the rest of my time and my energy to my family
Good for you.
and my
Good for you. Well,
and my part of my work also is supporting those actively working for social change, not only through my classes, but also through private trainings and consulting and stuff. So I do that as well.
very good. Well, if you do write a book, when you write, you will write another one. I know you will. I can't wait to read that because I'm sure it's going to give us a lot of info. I had such a great time reading your book. I tell you what,
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, you should check out my first book if you haven't read it, which is
I
Say
haven't
What You
read it yet,
Mean.
but I'll
So
have to
that
do that.
there
And I
you
can tell you
go.
that
Well, you can
I can
start
tell you
there.
this much. This book is going over to Romania. This book right here, there
Oh,
it is.
wonderful.
This is going to my brother-in-law. Lawrence, you're getting this, okay? Because I know he loves this stuff, and I think it's going to help Lawrence a lot. So, hey,
Great. I'm so
Oren,
glad.
thank you so much for being with us today on Books and Looks. It has been a real pleasure getting to meet you and discuss your book. Just wonderful. Thanks for coming.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me, Blaine.
I really had a great time interviewing Oren. It was really educational for me. It really is, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I hope you go seek his book because it's a really fine book. What am I looking at? Well, I am looking at something I was going to look at last week, okay? But if you remember, Punxsutawney Phil and his pups sort of interfered with that. But I'm looking at viewsonbooks.com. Now, have you gone to viewsonbooks.com? That is my website, and that's what I'm looking at because I'm not just putting up the book reviews for the books that we're discussing here on each and every episode. No, I put on other books that I've been reading. Matter of fact, I just posted the other day the new book by Steve Barry. If you like espionage, thriller stuff, this is his best book in years. It's book 18. That interview is on viewsonbooks.com. And as I said, if I'm reading a book or two a week, I can't interview everybody. So I'm putting the reviews on viewsonbooks.com, and you can get a lot of the books that I am reading, and you'll get to read the interviews. You might very well like them. You might want to buy them, get them from the library, whatever. It's just great books. I can only put so many interviews together, folks. So anyway, that's what I'm looking at. Viewsonbooks.com. Take a look. Go see the books on there. You can just, we have a huge catalog of books. We've been doing this for almost a year and a half. So I think you're going to find something you want to read out of those book reviews. Anyway, on behalf of viewsonbooks.com, on behalf of my good friends at Podcast Studio X, this is Blaine DeSantis for Books and Looks, saying may all your leaves be pages in a book.